In a quiet village called Lojora, where the sun painted everything in golden light and children laughed like drums in the distance, there lived a young girl named Zubaida. Zubaida was not just any girl. She was kind. She was beautiful, and her heart shone brighter than the stars that danced in the night sky. But life had not been easy for her. Zubaida worked as a maid. Every morning before the birds even finished their songs, she was up, sweeping the floors, boiling water, washing clothes, and cooking for Madame Isoke, the woman who owned the grandest house in all of Lojora. Madame Isoke had fine things: silk robes, golden spoons, perfumes from distant lands. And every day Zubaida would look at those things and wonder, what would it feel like to have a dress like that? Still, she worked hard, without complaint. But inside her heart lived a tiny, quiet wish, a wish to live like Madame Isoke, just for once. One afternoon, the sun stood high above Lojora, making the ground so hot it could fry cassava flat. Zubaida went to fetch water from the village well. Her jug balanced perfectly on her head, and her feet danced across the dusty. But on her way, she saw an old woman sitting under a crooked baobab tree. The old woman looked tired. Her feet were dusty, her face wrinkled like forgotten cloth. Her eyes closed as if sleep had taken her halfway. Zubaida, with her gentle heart, walked over and said kindly, "Good afternoon, Mama. You look thirsty. Here, take some of my water." "I can fetch another." The old woman slowly opened her eyes. She took the jug with shaky hands and drank. The water touched her throat like rain touches dry land. When she finished, she looked at Zubaida and smiled. And it was no ordinary smile. It was a smile filled with knowing, with secrets, with something ancient. "My child," the woman said, her voice like wind in a forest, "you have a heart of gold, and for that, I want to give you a gift." Zubaida blinked in surprise. "A gift?" "Yes," the woman said. "Make a wish. Just one. And it will come true." Zubaida's mouth fell open. She thought of the beautiful things Madame Isoke owned, the dresses, the jewelry, the food with names she couldn't pronounce. And softly, Zubaida whispered, "I wish to be rich as Madame Isoke." The old woman nodded, her eyes twinkling like stars. "In 3 days," she said, "your wish will come true. But remember, child, every wish walks its own path." And just like that, she was gone. Not walked, not limped, just gone, as if the wind had taken her away. Zubaida stood there, the empty jug still in her hand, staring at the tree. Was she dreaming? Had the sun played tricks on her? She shook her head and walked back to the well. But something inside her had changed. That night she dreamed of treasure, of golden coins falling like rain, of silk gowns and crowns made of pearls. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled in her sleep. 3 sunrises came and went. On the 4th morning, the village of Lojora woke up to a sound they had never heard before: gasping. From house to house, people whispered, "Come and see." They gathered outside Madame Isoke's compound, eyes wide, because Zubaida, the maid, was no longer sleeping on a mat in the corner. She had a room, no, a chamber, full of gold. Dresses lined the walls. Jewels sat in bowls. Perfumes filled the air like flowers in spring. People stared. "Zubaida is rich," someone said, blinking. "Richer than the richest," said another. Whispers ran like wild wind through the village. Did she find a treasure hidden in the forest? Did a prince fall in love with her? Maybe she used juju, but the truth was none of those things. Zubaida had not stolen. She had not lied. Her heart was still as pure as the day she shared her water. Madame Isoke stood tall beside her. "She is not a thief," she told the villagers. "She is blessed. Let her enjoy it." And her voice calmed the crowd. But their eyes still held wonder. That day, Zubaida sat alone on her new silk-covered bed, touching the lace of her dress. The same hands that once scrubbed floors now wore bracelets of silver. She smiled, but deep inside something whispered, "Every wish walks its own path." And so began the tale of Zubaida, the maid whose kindness brought magic, whose heart stayed humble even when her world turned golden. Years passed, and Zubaida enjoyed her new life. She ate whatever she wanted, wore gowns softer than clouds, and lived in a house big enough to echo with her laughter. Everything she once dreamed of was now hers. But still, something felt missing. In the quiet hours of morning, she would walk through her golden room. She'd run her fingers across shining coins, touch the gowns that shimmered in sunlight, and yet, her heart stayed silent. Riches filled her home, but not her soul. Zubaida, now known across Lojora as the girl whose room turned to treasure, lived in comfort. But even the finest fabrics could not warm a lonely heart. She had no one to share her joy with, no one to sit beside her under the moon, no one to hold her hand when the evenings felt too long. When Zubaida had wished to be rich, like Madame Isoki, she got more than she ever imagined. But like Madame Isoki, she now lived alone. No husband, no laughter shared with someone special. One day, as the sun painted the sky with soft orange light, Zubaida walked through the village. She passed small houses where families laughed and children chased chickens. She saw a mother braiding her daughter's hair on the steps, a father lifting his child high into the sky. Her heart pulled. She remembered what it felt like to wish for something. Then, she saw Nia, her old friend. Nia had always been full of joy, like a song that never ended. Zubaida smiled and called out, "Nia!" The two hugged tightly. Nia glowed as she talked about her life. "My husband brings me flowers for no reason," she said, her eyes shining. "He whispers sweet things into my ear even when he's tired from work. He always finds ways to show he loves me." Zubaida listened, her heart aching, not from jealousy, but from longing. She wanted that too. Not just gold, not just dresses, but someone who would call her by her name with love. That night, Zubaida sat alone in her big house. She remembered the old woman who had once made her dream come true. "Maybe she can help me again," Zubaida whispered to herself. She decided to try. The next morning, Zubaida walked through Lojora, past tall trees, quiet wells, and narrow paths that twisted like stories. She followed her memory to the same old tree, and there, sitting just as before, was the old woman. "Hello again, dear child," the woman said, smiling. Zubaida knelt beside her. "I have everything I once wished for," she said softly. "But now, I am alone. I wish for a husband, a kind man, someone like my friends, husband, gentle and loving." The old woman's eyes glimmered. "Wishes are powerful," she said, "but every wish walks its own path. Are you sure this is what your heart desires?" Zubaida nodded. The woman touched her hand and said, "Then, listen closely. In 3 days your wish will find you, but be ready, child, for not all gifts arrive the way we expect." Zubaida thanked her and returned home. Her heart fluttered. Hope was alive again. She marked the days on her calendar. 1, 2, and then came the third. That morning, the sun rose like a promise in the sky. Zubaida took a walk through the village, her feet light, her heart full. That's when she saw him. A man she had never seen before. He stood tall under the palm trees, his smile so warm it made the birds sing louder. His eyes held stories. His name was Zachary. People whispered about him. "Zachary," they said. "He's handsome, he's kind, but he's never chosen anyone." Zubaida walked past him. He looked at her. Their eyes met, and it was as if something ancient and soft moved through the air. They talked. First about the weather, then about the food stalls nearby, then about their dreams. It felt like they had known each other forever. And before the sun could set, Zachary looked into her eyes and said, Zubaida, will you marry me? Zubaida blinked. Today? She asked, laughing gently. Yes, he said. Because when you know, you know. Zubaida's heart danced. Her fingers tingled. She remembered the old woman's words. This was the third day. Her wish had arrived. And though it came quickly, like a breeze that suddenly carries a song, it felt real. She smiled. Yes. Zubaida's heart was ready to burst with joy. She said yes to Zachary, and within days the village buzzed with the news of their quick, beautiful wedding. There was dancing, singing, and plates full of food. Everyone talked about how suddenly it had happened, but Zubaida didn't care. She had someone to share her life with now, someone who would hold her hand, laugh with her, and sit beside her in the evenings. Just like her friend Naya, she thought. Her wish had come true. Zachary was everything she had dreamed of. Kind, charming, always showering her with sweet words, little gifts, and love that seemed to shine in public. Zubaida felt proud. She was his wife. She felt chosen, special. But as days passed and the moon rose and fell, things began to shift. Zubaida started to notice small cracks in the golden dream. Zachary was not the same behind closed doors. At first, it was small, hurtful. Words, cold glances, strange silences, then it became worse. His voice turned sharp. His hands, once soft and loving, became something else, something frightening. He yelled when she made simple mistakes. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he hit her. No one saw it. To the village, he was still the perfect husband. To Zubaida, he had become a stranger. She was trapped, a prisoner in her own home. She remembered Nia's glowing words, her dreamy stories. So one day, her heart heavy and body aching, Zubaida went to her friend. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke. I thought I was the lucky one, she whispered. But it's not love, it's fear. Nia's face dropped. She looked away. And then, she spoke softly. Zubaida, I'm living the same life. Zubaida's breath caught. What? She asked. Nia nodded. My husband. He's not what you see either. I smile outside because I must, but inside, I cry. Zubaida stared in silence. Her heart cracked open with a terrible truth. She had wished for a husband just like Nia's, and she had received exactly that. Both the love she saw and the pain she never did. Suddenly, Zubaida remembered the old woman's warning. Every wish walks its own path. And she realized the wish hadn't been wrong. It had been too specific, rooted in envy, blind to what was real. She had wished for a life like someone else's, without knowing what truly hid behind the curtain. Now her dream had turned into a quiet nightmare. She no longer danced in joy. She tiptoed in fear. Her heart longed to be free. One night, as the wind blew softly through Lojora, Zubaida couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought of her old self. The girl who had fetched water with a smile, who had shared a jug with a stranger who had once dreamed of beauty, but never begged for love at the cost of her peace. She sat up and whispered, I need to see her, one last time. She put on a simple cloth and stepped out into the night. Her feet carried her through the village, down the winding paths, past the trees that remembered her footsteps. Finally, she reached the big shady tree, and there, just like before, sat the old woman. Welcome back, child, the woman said softly. Zubaida fell to her knees. She wept, and she told her everything. How her husband had turned cruel, how her wish had led her into darkness, how she wanted peace more than riches, more than love. I want it undone, she begged. Please, let me go back. Or give me one more wish. The old woman listened in silence. Her eyes reflected sadness as though she had heard such pain many times before. When Zubaida finished, the woman spoke. "My child," she said gently, "you have no more wishes left." Zubaida's chest sank. "The magic that gave you your wealth and your husband cannot take them away. You must walk forward now, with the lessons you have learned." Zubaida lowered her head, but the woman wasn't done. She looked into Zubaida's eyes and said, "Let me tell you a story." She began. "Once upon a time, in a deep green jungle, the animals needed a king. A clever tortoise said, 'I will be king.' He wanted the best food, the finest shell, and the most attention. But the tortoise was slow. He was small, so he used tricks. He wore feathers that weren't his. He made himself look big with borrowed beauty. And for a while, he fooled them all. But one day, rain came. The feathers fell. And the truth showed. The jungle saw who he really was. Not a king, just a tortoise wearing dreams that weren't his." Zubaida listened. She understood. She had worn someone else's dream. She had asked for love based on someone else's story. And now, the feathers had fallen. But even a tortoise, slow and quiet, could still walk forward. Zubaida stood up slowly. Her face still wet from tears, but her back was straighter. Her heart steady. She had no more wishes, but she had truth. And truth, though it didn't sparkle, was the beginning of freedom. Zubaida's heart sank as she listened to the old woman's tale. The story of the clever tortoise, Toros, who wished to be king, sounded far too familiar. Toros had wished for the crown, thinking it meant luxury and praise. And just like that, he became king. But he didn't realize the crown came with war, with worry, and with the heavy burden of leading others. Toros had wanted the lion's life, not knowing the lion's struggle. And when he wished to return to his old life, the jungle animals didn't forget how he had fooled them. So instead of the crown, he was made a helper, carrying loads, working hard to make up for what he had done. At last, Toros learned what it truly meant to wish for something too big, too fast, and not meant for him. Zubaida's eyes filled with tears. She too had wished for things that belonged to others. Madame Isoki's riches, Nia's marriage. And like Toros, she didn't know what pain was hidden inside those wishes. She thought she had been chasing joy, but all along she had been walking towards sorrow. The old woman looked at her with soft eyes. "My child," she said gently, "your heart holds regret. I see it. And because you have listened, truly listened, I will offer you one last gift." Zubaida looked up, surprised. "I thought I had no more wishes left." The old woman nodded slowly. "You don't. Not in the way you think. But I can give you a final choice. Not to change the past, but to walk forward with truth." Zubaida sat quietly listening. "You may return to the life you lived before," the woman said, "back to being a maid. But you will not go back as the same Zubaida. You will start anew, with less comfort, fewer things, but with more wisdom. It will be hard, but it will be yours." Zubaida's breath caught in her throat. She could keep her life of luxury, the golden walls, the gowns, the name, but stay trapped in a house of fear. Or she could return to the quiet life she once knew, and rebuild from the ground with her own hands, her own heart. She thought of the pain. She thought of the nights she had cried silently beside Zachary, of Nia's false smile, of the price she had paid for chasing dreams that weren't hers. Then, she thought of the girl she once was, the girl who gave water to a stranger, the girl who worked with love, not with envy. Zubaida took a deep breath. "I want to go back," she said. "I want to live a life that is true, even if it's simple, even if it's small. Let it be mine." The old woman smiled, and with a wave of her hand, the world shifted. Zubaida opened her eyes. She was back in Madame Isoki's mansion, but not in her rich room, not surrounded by silk or gold. She was in the corner room, holding a broom in one hand and a rag in the other. She was a maid again, but something inside her was different. Her heart felt light, her chest free, and when she looked into the mirror, she didn't see someone poor. She saw someone brave. Days turned into weeks. Zubaida swept the floors, fetched water, washed dishes. But this time she noticed things she never had before. The softness of the morning wind, the sound of laughter from the children next door, the warmth in Madame Isoki's voice when she said, "Thank you." Zubaida no longer compared herself to anyone. She no longer dreamed of another woman's life. Instead, she began to build her own, one step at a time. She formed true friendships. She found peace in quiet. And she smiled, really smiled, not because she had everything, but because she finally understood what mattered. The people of Lojora still spoke of her. The girl who was rich, they whispered. The one who lived in a golden room. But now they said something new. She's wiser now, kinder, stronger. And Zubaida, standing under the same old sky, sweeping the same old steps, smiled quietly. She had no crown, but she had peace. She had no jewels, but she had truth. She had no husband, but she had herself. And that was more than enough. Moral of the story: do not chase what shines on others. True wealth lies in peace, and real joy begins when you walk your own path.